Hello everyone and welcome back to the Belgian Beer Brothers channel. I'm Cedric, coming to you from Antwerp, and today we are gonna taste another special beer. Why is it so special? Well, because it is discontinued. Why, you may ask? Well, not because it was bad, it was just a limited run. Now, we have talked about both breweries that made this because this is a collaboration. This is a collaboration between Duvel Moortgat and brewery A in Amsterdam. It is called A van de Duvel, or loosely translated, the devil's egg. Why? Because A, not in this spelling, means egg, and brewery A already has a beer called Columbus Egg. So it's a pun. It is bottled in a 33 centiliter Steiny, so the iconic Duvel bottle, but it is capped off with a Brouwerij A bottle cap. This beer is brewed, I believe, about 2 years ago. And some people may say that this is actually the predecessor of the Duvel 666. Well, technically it is the predecessor of the Duvel 666. But some people dare say that the 666 is actually just a rebranding of this beer. I can tell you, Scout's honor, hand over heart, that's not the case. And how do I know this? Because I was involved in the production of this beer. It is, however, I believe, the very first New England IPA, or beer that could be called New England IPA, brewed by Duvel Moortgat. Of course, I already had some experience with IPAs and New England IPAs. Duvel, of course, had a Vedette IPA. But nonetheless, this is also not the first A van de Duvel. There was one before. I forgot the year. I think it was like 2013, 14 something. And that was a completely different beer. I believe that was a red rye IPA. I didn't have the pleasure of tasting that. I wasn't with the company back then. And it was a similar label, but a different color scheme. It was a red label with black and white instead of a white label with red and gold in this case. So, what does the label tell us? Of course, we have the iconic red D by Duvel and Brouwerij A, the ostrich with its egg. Artisanal Belgian craftsmanship, hazy IPA. They don't want to say that it's a New England IPA. And Amsterdam character, 6.66% ABV, like I said, predecessor of the 666. Specialty beer with a devilish character, unfiltered, very aromatic, fruity and soft in taste. Contains a malted barley, malted wheat, and slightly hazy. Alright. I also love what they did with the logo. It is the ostrich egg with the devil's horns and his pointy tail. Gotta give it to these guys, they know their marketing. I am gonna drink this in a very, very classic vintage Duvel glass. Actually the same glass that I'm keeping my bottle caps in these days. I believe this is an 80s glass. I haven't found the history on this, but I should look that up someday. And yeah, I went thrift shopping and found two, so I bought both of them. You know, worst case, if I have a glass twice, I'll just trade it with a friend for another one. Oh, the ksh tells me that this is still very carbonated. Now, it is long overdue. Like I said, this was a limited run. It's brewed in 2020 actually, and this had its due date in February 21, which was my birthday, or it is every year. So let's see what this does. I did keep this in the cellar, so technically it's a coin flip. Smells all right. quite sweet, a bit malty, a bit hoppy. Oh, a lot of yeast in there. So I'll have to pour very carefully. Now I don't mind a bit of yeast in my beer. On the contrary, I'm one of those, as you guys have noticed, especially some commenters, not naming any names, I pour in all the yeast with my Duvel as well. But I don't like chunks in my beer. So I'm very careful. The moment that I have to chew my beer, I'm not fond of that. I don't know if you can see this in the video, but this beer is still highly carbonated. Now that sound when opening this, I don't want to say I'm specialized in old beers, but I did gather some knowledge because apparently people found out that I'm a beer collector, and when they find old beers in the cellar or they take over a bar, oftentimes I get called with the question, will you come to the cellar and look at the beers that we have? And then I have to make a list which are still good and which are not, or which I suspect to be still good and are not. Of course, a lot of tasting was involved in those endeavors, and I gathered some knowledge about old beers. One thing that is quite certain is that when you open a bottle and it still goes, chances of it being oxidized are nearly zero, because that means there's still pressure in the bottle and there's still carbon dioxide filling the headspace. So here we see this is quite hazy, and we do see a tiny bit of flaking in the yeast, unfortunately, but since I poured quite carefully, it's just very hazy. I don't have any chunks in there. Now, some detail that just caught my eye on this glass. This is actually a glass that is on the foot, and in modern glasses you will see that this is a completely flush surface. That's just a detail. But back to the beer. It is that golden yellow Duvel color that we all love. It is a bit more to the yellow side, a bit less gold actually, and it has a small amount of foam, of course, because I poured very carefully. Nonetheless, there is still foam in there, and it is a nice white color. It hasn't dissipated completely either, so that still does its work. Now in the scent I do notice that it might have gone a bit stale. Now bear in mind I am drinking this nearly 2 years after the shelf time has passed, so beer might go stale then. But this is still an IPA. So as I told you guys with the Quake IPA from Boulevard, the main influence on these aromas is UV light. Of course, as time passes, these things degrade as well. I'm quite certain that this beer hasn't seen any UV light. But of course, time didn't stand still. So these aromas, these tastes might have degraded over time. If I smell this beer, I do smell some fruitiness and some hoppiness. Well, not really fruity, but it's quite hoppy. But it also smells a bit stale. So I am very curious as for what the taste will tell us. Lo and behold, it actually tastes really good still. I do notice that it might have, it tastes a bit watered down, so some of the aromas, some of the iso alpha acids have degraded over time. And I do notice that it has gone a bit stale, just like the smell actually made me think. But it hasn't gone bad, absolutely not. It doesn't smell like wet newspapers or wet dog, even worse. I have had beers that went there. But this is actually still quite drinkable. This is quite nice. I know that when the beer came out, and I can't stress enough, the fresher you drink an IPA or a dry hop beer, the better it's gonna taste. And I absolutely loved this beer when it came out. And it's been 2 years now since I had one, or maybe even 3 years. Yeah. Yeah, I still love that basic taste. It has gone a bit stale, but not that bad actually. Now, I'm just reminded I still have one of these in the fridge. I might just do a shootout between this one and the Duvel 666 so we can compare a bit. But of course, as tastes and aromas have degraded over time, I'm quite sure the 666 will win, but we can still compare the two. Might I also focus your attention to this glass? I absolutely love this glass, even though it's the most simple design ever. But just how these black letters pop on this gold, yellow and white background, I like those details. I actually can't believe after 2 or 3 years how carbonated this beer still is. And like I said, we do have some slight flaking, so enzymes are doing their work. The yeast is flaking a little bit, but there are no chunks, quote unquote, there. So this is still very drinkable actually, and I quite like this. Okay, so what have we learned today? Van de Duvel, will it age? Yeah, but it does change over time. So, I told you guys I'm gonna do a segment, will it age? Actually, I'm gonna do this quite more often. I still have some old beers in the fridge. But I will try to get my hands on a fresh one and then pit them against each other. So I'll take the aged one or the forgotten one and a fresh one, and we'll see what the difference is. Of course, with this beer I can't, because we don't make them fresh. So, anywho, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'd say scoring this, let's make it a 3. I'm quite sure that when it came out it was a 3.5, 375 for me. But of course, time did its thing. So let's make it a 3 now, and we'll see what happens over time with the other beers. As usual, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry I'm dragging this video out a bit, but I haven't scripted anything here. So yeah, it's an improv. As usual, if you have anything to say, if you have any remarks, questions or any suggestions, let me know in the comments down below. As you guys have noticed, I do take requests if I'm able. And if you want to see more, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and you will get notifications whenever I upload something, which most of the time is Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. See you guys next time with another beer. Cheers.